These are two separate questions: white paper and TBI. They're a bit connected, but not completely. The white paper, as you know, was passed by the cabinet yesterday. It is divided into two big sections. The first section is a description of where we are and following basically a 40-year decline in the economy, and in which three or four key aspects emerge. First, the country, has in effect destroyed the private sector. The private sector is now either completely reliant on the government or is immaterial. The second theme is increased reliance on oil, and so industry has declined, other sectors have declined. Oil now accounts for around 90% of the government revenue, or 91% of government revenue, and so it's a sector that we do not control. It's a commodity we do not control the prices of. They're imposed on us from outside, and following OPEC plus, they're now we don't even control production levels. A third theme is that the government has expanded massively in terms of number of employees, salary levels, etc., to an extent where just to meet salaries and pensions at this level, we have to oil has to be at a price of around $63 as a back of the envelope calculation. So, government revenue now oil revenue doesn't even cover salaries and pensions. A fifth theme is just the dysfunctionality of the government, in particular at the Ministry of Finance, where there is no real control over the fiscal situation. We do not have a single treasury account, and that really gives the impression that one hand in the Iraqi government doesn't know what the other is doing. A sixth issue, for example, is the heavy burden that the state-owned companies impose on the economy. They're very inefficiently run, they're loss makers, they're subsidized, etc. So at a very big picture, where we are now is a GDP that's reliant on oil, a GDP that 25% or 26% of it this year is just to pay salaries and salaries and pensions. A GDP where the deficit is around 25% of GDP. A GDP where 10% of GDP is subsidies to the state-owned enterprises and the government. So it really is not a very healthy situation. Anyway, the second part of the white paper deals with looking at 5 areas of reform. The first one and most important one is, initially the most important one is the reform of the Ministry of Finance, or the fiscal side, where we're trying to increase revenue, decrease expenses in certain ways, including salaries and so on, and reforming structurally the Ministry of Finance. Second part is to reform the economy. We realize that with a contracted state sector resulting because of the deficits we have to get the economy moving, otherwise there'll be a contraction. And so we deal with things like reforming the banking sector, reforming the insurance, reforming the agriculture sector, making changes to the energy sector, etc., industry and things like that. Third part of the second part of the white paper is trying to building some key infrastructure, and we deal with the issue of financing it, etc. A fourth is to improve services, so health, water, things like that. And the last part is to try to reform the, let's say, the dysfunctionality of the state, the administration of the state through better procurement processes, kind of training, etc. So that's where the white paper comes. We realize we've got two key difficulties. The first one is we're trying to get this white paper to be implemented at a time when we've got a really, really serious fiscal situation. That could both be a challenge and a benefit, because people will realize that we have little alternative. But at the same time, we've got elections next year, and we're not sure how that's going to work. Your question on TBI, my policies at TBI are really, the first and most important thing is to fix the balance sheet. There are structural problems with the balance sheet that we need fixing, and fixing urgently. We have liquidity at this stage. That's not a big issue, but the balance sheet needs real fixes. A second issue is I'd like to transition TBI to somehow be an enabler for the banking sector as a whole. And so, assisting banks in things like access to international markets, etc. The third is to really focus on services such as mobile banking, etc. And a fourth is to play a part in the economy and activating the economy. There's an initiative at the central bank to encourage banks to lend to industry, infrastructure, etc. But the pace of this is so slow that I intend to set up a team to just focus on activating this and increasing lending into the economy to get production, to get an industrial sector, to get employment, etc. So those are kind of some of the big picture things. On an international level, I'd like to perhaps expand the bank. Our first branch is supposed to be in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, and we're pushing forward in this. But I'd like to actually consider expanding into Turkey and possibly China, because those are some key trading partners of TBI, of Iraq actually, not TBI. And finally, I would like to, after fixing the balance sheet and getting a healthy balance sheet and imposing new corporate governance mechanisms that kind of slowly transition the bank out of the Iraq government sector, and becoming a really government-run institution, to try to transition it to a properly run corporate entity, to maybe list the shares of TBI internationally to bring in international investors or strategic investors.